It's going to be recorded. You can get a copy of that so that you know where you are if you need to pass it along to your colleagues who are still trying to get started here at the end of the year for their MIPS reporting for 2017. So this is being recorded. Second thing, as Heather mentioned, if you just jumped on now, if you do have questions throughout the session, please feel free to type them in the chat box, or you can contact us after the session with your questions as well. Happy to address those. And we're going to try to leave some time at the end of the session to go through things too. So that's just a couple of housekeeping items for folks here. And as you can see from the agenda today, this session is specifically geared towards, you're going to walk away from the call knowing what you should be doing right now if you still want to try to report your MIPS measures in 2017 and go for some type of bonus. If you're not interested in a bonus and you don't want to participate more fully, we just actually ran a session a couple of hours ago on our MIPS for Beginners program. Information about that program is on our website. You can actually sign up for that on our website. It's an automatic program. That's M4B. That's if you're just interested in avoiding the payment adjustment. This specific talk right now, this Lunch and Learn, is about how to potentially move towards getting some sort of bonus for the MIPS program here in 2017 and where you need to be right now in the process to catch yourself up. If you don't know a lot about the MIPS program, the rules, the policy, the program rules, that's more of another session, and we actually have recorded sessions that talk about what the MIPS program is, what the rules are for that program. So those are different sessions, and you can contact us and actually go to our website and you can review those sessions. Those have been recorded. So right now where you're coming in on, where we're starting off is, I know what MIPS is, but I haven't done anything all year, and I do still want to try to go for bonus. What do I do? How do I get started? That's kind of where we're positioning you right now if you're on this call. So you're going to get started with looking at where are we right now? We know a little bit about the program. We know we want to report. It's late in the year. How are we going to do it? So that's how we're going to get started. I'm going to pause for a moment to make sure that Heather's still hearing me loud and clear. Recording's working okay, and then we'll go ahead for a screen share.
We can hear you fine. So go right ahead. Thanks.
Great. So this is what we call our end of the year MIPS presentation. And when I say end of the year, just to position everyone and help you understand, prior to December 31st, those are the patients that you're able to report on for MIPS 2017. So when folks ask, what are the deadlines for this program? There's a couple of different deadlines. One of the deadlines is who are the patient encounters? Who are the patients that we can actually report on? You can report on patients that you've seen for their date of service that fall between January 1st, 2017 and December 31st, 2017. So those are all the patient encounters that you can include dates of service for the reporting period. That's different from when does all our actual data have to be into the P360 portal. That deadline is actually the end of February. So the good news here is you do still have some time. You can report on patient encounters that exist between January 1st and December 31st. And then you even have time to go into our portal from January until the end of February to continue to add data. You just need to make sure that the patient data that you're adding, the encounters that you're adding, exist or occurred prior to December 31st, 2017. And then our deadline, a P360 deadline to get all that data to us into the portal, into the Patient 360 portal, is the end of February, last day of February. So that's just positioning a couple of different deadlines for you. Patient encounters from January 1st to December 31st. That's who you're reporting on when you're reporting patients. And then the deadline to get all the information that you're reporting on, the patient data, into our portal is the end of February. Of course, we encourage folks to be doing it early and often and adding data to our portal on a weekly, monthly basis. But for those of you who are just getting started now, let's face it, it's impossible. There's obviously going to be retroactive capturing and collecting of data. It's okay to do that, and so that's why we're letting you know what those deadlines are. Real quick, just to go over this, most of you should know this by now if you're on this call, because right now you're just trying to figure out how do we get our data in now at this time of year. There's a couple of different reporting options. You've got your test pace, which I addressed in the beginning. If you just want to avoid the payment adjustment, please go back and listen to our recorded version of the MIPS for Beginners program. Super easy, one patient, one encounter. For those of you that are on this call, you want to focus on either the 90-day or the full year of participation. I would say it's going to be a little bit harder to go back in and retroactively pull all of your data for the entire year. It is still possible, and it will maximize your bonus, but it's going to take a little bit more work and effort So you're going to want to have conversations with us about what the best options are in order to be able to do that. Realistically, the easier option to still be able to get some sort of bonus and participate more fully is probably the 90-day option. And so we're going to talk to you about both of these now. We're going to go through selecting the measures, how to select a measure in our portal, what that looks like, how to enter the encounters, and then how to look at our analytics to determine how you're doing, what needs to change, basically updates on your actual performance and your score. So we also like to position this when we get started with the spirit of the program, quality payment program. Really, the ultimate spirit of the program, according to CMS, is to, really change that clinical behavior, which will eventually improve patient quality of care and improve outcomes. However, we also know, as a registry and as a QCDR, now this will be our 10th year, so since the inception of the PQRS program, PQRI, we have been a registry. So we've been in this for quite some time, and we do understand the provider perspective. In fact, my partner and co-founder of Patient 360 is a provider himself and has his own practice. So he understands that whenever you tie the spirit of the program, which is let's make all these great improvements and sing kumbaya, when you tie that to a payment adjustment, it can be frustrating and it can sometimes lose some of its value, the spirit of the program. What we try to do as a registry and as a QCDR is balance the two. I don't think that they have to be mutually exclusive. I actually think that there is a way to do both. There's a way to uphold the spirit of the program, but also to avoid the payment adjustment and possibly earn a bonus with integrity. So essentially, there's some gamesmanship here, but there's ways to do that with balance, and we're going to talk to you about that. And typically, when we're advising folks, you're going to get that balanced advising from us. We're always going to tell you, look, we get what's going on. We're helping you try to avoid a payment adjustment and achieve bonus, but we've developed a lot of analytics tools to actually try to help you uphold the spirit of the program, which is to change the clinical behavior and improve outcomes. As you continue to get more comfortable with the program, the spirit of the program, the stakes are going to become higher. And so again, that's why we're trying to help you as we go and as things evolve with the program and it gets more complex, to really talk to you and explain, provide all of these educational sessions on what the rules of the program are, which ones really matter, which ones aren't as important, and what to really focus on in order to make the changes that you need while also achieving a bonus. Again, that balance between getting the bonus, avoiding the payment adjustment, and also improving your quality of care. So once again, these are the rules of the program. Most of you on this call by now, if you're here at this time of year, because we are at the end of the year, you should pretty much be aware of these rules. For the 90-day period, for what you're looking at the six or more quality measures. We do not create limits on how many quality measures you can import into our portal, whether you're doing it via our templates or you're using QRDA3. And as a matter of fact, we have a QRDA3 optimizer now, which is fantastic. It optimizes by patient encounters when you submit a QRDA3 file. So if you're planning on doing that, that will optimize by encounters and let you know the highest percentage of encounters that you're submitting for the whole year, what the best percentage is going to be, and optimize that score, ultimately leading to more points for that measure, which ultimately leads to more money in your pocket. So that's something to keep in mind. Jot down a note. Any of you who are on EMRs that can export QRDA3 files, talk to us about that, because that's going to be a good option for you to optimize your data and to get the maximum amount of points, especially here at the end of the year. You got to pick your 90 best days, or you could even go back and pull QRDA3 files for a full year. That's really easy because you just query them out, and you'll be able to optimize your data for that. So jot that down. If you are familiar with QRDA3 files and you know your EMR produces them, you're definitely going to want to go that avenue with us because it'll get you the maximum amount of points. You want to look at 50% of all your patients, at least 50%. Most folks, again, we balance between, the gamesmanship, but also playing the game with integrity. You want to make sure that you're picking at least 50% of your patient population, but there are folks who say, look, I've got 500 patients and 450 of them met the performance for this measure. Go ahead and submit the 450 that met performance, because that's going to earn you a significant amount of points for that measure. But it has to be for data completeness, at least 50% of your patient population. And something else I want to make you aware of, folks have asked this over and over again, it has to be 50% of all of your patients, not just your Medicare Part B. And the reason being, this is not a P360 rule. CMS actually took into consideration provider feedback over the years that said, well, we don't treat our Medicare patients any different than any of our other patients for these measures. We want everybody to be calculated and adjusted for the measure, all of our patients the same, so CMS did that. And so when you submit its patient payer data for all patients, they do ask that you delineate between which ones are Medicare and which ones are not, but they are all calculated towards your final score, all the patients, as long as it's greater than 50% of them. You've got about 243 measures that you can select with us. We will briefly touch upon QCDR. We are also a QCDR and the measures that are available for QCDR and what that is. But if you're interested in learning more about QCDR, we actually have an entire separate educational session for that as well, which has been recorded. That's available on our website. If you can't find it, just ask Heather, shoot her an email, she'll send it to you for those of you that need to know more about QCDR. So the first thing you're going to do, for those of you that are signed up or getting ready to sign up with Patient 360, you're here at the end of the year, you just want to crank this out, you're going to enter your clinic information into our portal. First, that consists of either adding a provider and adding your details about your clinic and your group, or you're adding your group practice and which pace you want to report at, whether you're doing 90 days, full year, or custom, and you can add in the dates there. Most of you are not participating in a CAP survey, but if you are or you don't know what it is, you can ask us and we'll explain it to you. So you're going to get your basic details in about either your group practice or your provider. Most of you on the call, if you are a group practice, just so everybody here knows, group practices are any NPIs that exist within one TIN if it's greater than 2. So you are considered a group practice if it's greater than 2. There is no reason, if you are on this call right now and you're wanting to get started, if you have more than 2 providers in your TIN, you will report as a group practice. It's encouraged by CMS, by Patient 360, by everyone. There's no reason for you to report individually anymore. That's part of the legacy program. There wouldn't be a reason, a strategic reason, a financial reason. There is no reason to report individually if you have more than 2 providers within your group. So let me repeat that. If you've got 10 providers in your group, you're going to enter those provider details into our portal. They need to exist. They have to exist in our portal and in the software so that the software can tell you how your providers are performing amongst each other within the TIN. But there is no reason why you would not submit the data as a group entity. And if you have questions about that, we have a really great section in our FAQ section of our portal that talks about the benefits of reporting as a group. And there's not really benefits of reporting individually. It's not that you can't. Technically you could, but it's a lot more work. It's more cumbersome for the providers if you're reporting individually and you have more than 2 providers within your TIN. I'm going to pause for a second in case anybody has questions about that. Sounds like nothing in the chat box. I know I'm talking really fast, so that's another reason I
nothing in
pause.
the chat box right now, Amanda.
Heather, you can still hear me okay?
Everything sounds great. And folks, if you do have questions, once that group submission part of the presentation sinks in a little bit, feel free to just pop that into the chat or email at me afterwards, and I can provide you with that FAQ document that Amanda was mentioning.
Thanks so much, Heather. So when you go into the portal in that section I just showed you about your clinic and you type in your clinic details, which EMR you're on or not on, if you're not on an EMR, if you have a hardship exemption, if you're doing CAPS, there's just various things that it's going to prompt and ask you about your clinic. The software then intuitively decides based on what you're entering about your clinic how to sort of pace you and categorize you. So some folks that are that designate that they're on a 2014 EMR, the portal, the P360 software is automatically going to populate and let you know which ACI transition-based measures, for example, that you would have to report on. If you're not on an EMR, it's going to remove the ACI category for you. If you have a hardship, it's going to reweight that category for you. So it's important when you get started that you fill out all the information that you can about your clinic and answer all the questions it's asking, because the categories, the paces, how your score is evaluated is based on the details that you provide about your clinic. So that's just something to keep in mind. When you go to select your measures, there's a few different ways to approach this. So we'll talk to you about all these different approaches about what, strategically, we're late in the game now, so it's going to be tough for folks that are just jumping on now that have never submitted data before. You're not going to be able to make too much change at this point here. In December, you've got another less than a month to make shifts to the type of data that you're reporting and the measures that you're reporting and the encounters and the patients that you're seeing. But if you've captured 6, 7, 8 measures at least, and you've kind of been capturing that, there's still strategy involved with which you can ultimately decide which measures that you actually want to submit to CMS. So you don't have to submit, let's say you've been capturing data on 8 measures. You can dump those 8 into the portal, see how your scores are for all of them, and then ultimately, if you decide you only want to submit 6 to CMS from our portal that are the 6 highest scoring, we can do that with you. So it really depends on how you want to approach things and how you've strategically been thinking about measures throughout the year, or if you haven't, then there's some sort of approaches that you can take in our portal to kind of shuffle around the data and figure out what's going to optimize your score the most. We do have a code selector tool, so when you're in the portal and you're looking at quality measure specifications, so when you click on the left menu on quality measures, there's a section that opens up all the different quality measures that are available, and at the top there's a little thing that says code selector. You can pop in any of your most frequently used CPT codes. I often tell folks like your top 25, and then that code selector is just going to parse out any of the denominator eligible measures that you could potentially be utilizing. So that's usually for folks that really have no idea and haven't been tracking this at all, and they're like, oh, I don't know which measure. It will parse it by CPT code. So it will say, okay, I've been using 99201, and we use it all the time. It will tell you which measures are most applicable to those CPT codes. So that's one way to approach it. You can also look at the specialty measure sets on the QPP site. So they parse it out into specialty measure sets. So does our portal. So when you're in our portal, on the right-hand side, there's a selector where you can kind of parse out and look at which measures are found within which specialty set. So that's another way to do it if you want to do just by specialty measure sets. And many folks do that. It's been helpful just to see, well, for our specialty, what are measures that are typically supported and utilized. It doesn't mean you can't, if you're reporting as a group and, for example, like you have a specialty measure set for, I don't know, sleep apnea or something like this, but you utilize measure, say 46, med reconciliation often, right? Because a lot of folks do. Like you can mix and match. You don't have to use every single measure within the specialty measure set. You just need to make sure that whichever measures you're picking, you are meeting data completeness for those measures. So you wouldn't pick a measure outside of your specialty set where, say, you only had 5 patients for the entire year to report on. Then CMS would kind of look at that and say, that's not really meeting data completeness. That measure really isn't the best measure you could have selected. So you want to select strategically measures that you can get the most amount of points on, but that you also have as many patient encounters as you can on, so as many denominator eligible instances. When I say get the most amount of points, I mean that the numerator response, which is did you meet the measure requirement or did you not, that you're getting lots of I met the requirement, because that's going to boost your score. And of course, you want to review the measures across all 3 categories. So I don't want to talk in a vacuum and just say that this program is quality measures only. You do have the ACI category, which used to be meaningful use, and the improvement activities category, which is new to focus on. Don't worry about cost right now in 2017, although it is going to be calculated in 2018 scores, but I don't want to blow anybody's mind right now. We actually have a blog that we're putting out, I think it went out today actually, on the 2018 rules. So you can find that blog on our website if you want to know, hey, what's changing for 2018? But assuming that you're on the call right now because you've got to skedaddle and get your stuff in now for 2017, I'm not going to blow your mind right now about trying to talk about 2018 rules. Just know there's a blog out there. Jot this down. Go to Patient 360 website, blog on 2018 under blogs, and you can read about that later after you're not so bogged down with trying to get stuff in for 2017. So again, not in a vacuum. You have to look at all 3 categories, and that goes back to when I talked in the beginning about type in all the information you can about your clinic, because if you're excluded in any way, for example, if you have a hardship exemption for the ACI category, that's going to reweight to the quality category. So there's different exceptions and nuances. Some folks do not have to report on all 3 categories for data completeness because they have particular exemptions or unique circumstances that may or may not be you. We won't know about that until you put it in the About Your Clinic section of our portal. And then that will dictate, based on the program rules, if there's any recalculations or reweighting that needs to occur. If you're going at full blast, you already know you're on a 2015 version of an EMR, you have to do the ACI, you have to do the IA, then you want to review the program rules and just know that you got to report on 6 quality measures. In order to achieve data completeness on greater than 50% of your patients for each measure, you've got to do your ACI base measures. And yes, people ask all the time, well, what if I have the ACI measures, but I only have, say, 3 of the 4 required base measures? Then you don't get credit for that category. You have to report on all of the required base measures. You can report more than the required base measures, but you have to have the required base measures reported on in order to obtain points for that particular ACI category. And the IA category is new. You do not have to be on an EMR to participate in the IA category. It's improvement activities. It's really easy. There's like 90 of them, and you only have to get 40 points, which is usually about picking 3 or 4 of them. And it's like clicking a few boxes in our portal. So it's crazy not to do this category because it's an easy 15 points. It's a new category, so I think CMS is just being really flexible with how they take in the data anyway, because this category has never existed. So definitely don't forget about that category either. It's not just the quality measures that are in a vacuum. You have to consider all 3 categories now because that's this program. It's been blended into one. Don't forget about benchmarks as well when you're looking at quality measures, and we'll show you those in just a second for the measures. But the higher you can score against the national benchmark, that's what's going to earn you more of those points that you're looking for each of the quality measures that you select. I think everyone pretty much understands, but let me say one more time, you're choosing 6 quality measures. For the advancing care, depending on the EMR you're on, it's either 4 or 5 of the base measures that you need to report. And then, like I said, IA, super easy. You've got to get 40 points. Usually that equates to about 3 or 4 of the IA improvement activities measures, and there's something like 90 total of those, so not hard. If you want to use our QCDR, you can actually use a combination of the MIPS pre-existing quality measures from CMS and any of our 7 QCDR original patient 360 measures. Those are in association with the Maine Osteopathic Association. They're measures that we developed for providers that couldn't find all the measures they need for the regular MIPS CMS measures. By the way, definitely check this out when you're trying to be strategic as you're selecting your measures. We were on a call just the other day, and this is in the final rule as well for 2018. In the next year or 2, these are going to be pretty much, they're going to remove these measures. They're really not going to be used anymore because they're topped out, and so they're really not worth a lot. Usually topped out measures, if you're not getting 100% on them, you're going to only get 3 points. So you have to essentially be scoring perfectly, or you're only going to get 3 points for the measure. So if you're trying to be strategic, I would look at measures that have a national benchmark. And furthermore, if they have a national benchmark, that are not topped out, because it just makes it more of a pain in the butt to report on and less likely that you're going to get the maximum points. Typically, those types of measures, again, like I said, are only 3 points. If there's no national benchmark, you want to pay attention to that because you can only get 3 points on it. So if there's other measures that you can report on that have a national benchmark and that are not topped out, please pay attention to those. Those are going to be strategically better for you to pick because you can get more points on those. So this is just a quick example of what one of those topped out measures looks like. If you look down here at the bottom, if you're not scoring at least a 95% on this measure, it's like you're only going to get 3 points, and you have to get 100 in order to get the 10. There's nothing in between. So that's just an example. And those measure numbers that I just showed you are the ones that are topped out. And if you forget what they are or didn't jot them down, we can send that to you, not a problem. Measures, this is what they look like in our portal. So you're going to go about selecting different measures for each category. In this case, we're looking at those improvement activities that I showed you. You'll be able to select any of the 90 improvement activities and report on those, and it's literally a click of a button. Same thing for quality measures. This is that code selector I was telling you about, where you can put in your CPT code to look at the most frequently used measures. You'll be able to click here and just essentially pick the measures that you want. They're sorted by what's high priority, what are beginner ones, what are inverse, what are outcomes measures, which specialty measures set. Remember I said you can sort by that as well in the portal. Same thing for advancing care information, and it's already going to parse out. See how here it's saying base score? If you see a check mark, that means it's a base measure, one of those required base measures that you must report on in order to get credit for the category. I'm not going to spend too much time on QCDR other than because I don't want to confuse folks. Here's how QCDR applies to you, QCDR. If you have looked at all 243 of those measures, and you're, for example, osteopathic manipulative medicine, OMM and OMT, if you're a pain specialist, sports, Any of these groups or specialties, talk to Heather about our QCDR because that's probably going to be the best fit for you. Likely there are not a lot of measures that are available for you under the regular quality measures, so that's when folks join our QCDR so that they have the opportunity to report on additional measures that have been made available and approved by CMS. So again, if you're finding that you don't, of the 243 measures, you really want to get bonus and you can't find 6 that you can perform really well on, talk to us about the QCDR option because there are additional measures that have been approved for Patient 360 by CMS. So that's all I'm going to touch on for that because again, we have a full session on QCDR if you need to know more about that. A few different ways to get us your encounter. So once you're part of Patient 360, there's a few different ways that you can send us the information. Some folks, they're just a solo provider. They don't have a ton of data. They're going to log into our portal weekly, daily, and they're going to enter their patient encounters right into our portal, answer the questions, be done with it. So that's option number 1. We also have templates. Many folks use the templates, especially people that are going back retroactively, because they've been capturing data over time and they're just going to dump it onto the template and upload it into our portal all at once. We prefer that folks don't wait until the end of the year to do that because it gets to be quite a long queue entering the data, but it's still an option. And it's definitely an option right now if you want to get started. We have lots of folks uploading on a nightly basis, uploading their templates. Other option is QRDA3, super easy. If you're, again, looking to whether or not your EMR produces QRDA3 files, it's really, really easy. You import those QRDA3 files right into our portal. It shows you immediately on the dashboard, same as the templates. Those will show you on the dashboard straight away how you're performing and score calculate for you. But the QRDA3 files are automatically produced by your EMR so that you don't have to actually dump any data into a template. The data is already exports from the QRDA3 into the portal. And then we also have an optimizer, which is really, really cool. So we just developed this. It's in production now. It's pretty much ready now. The optimizer for QRDA3 folks, essentially when you submit data via QRDA3 file, the optimizer is going to look at the entire year of data, and it's going to parse out only the best encounters, the highest scoring encounters data, and make sure that it's greater than 50% and give you those score points, and that's what ends up getting submitted to CMS. So it's a really great optimizer tool for QRDA3. And then if you have other EMR, EHR integration, at this point you want to talk to Heather immediately, ASAP, so that we can coordinate development time for the type of EMR that you have and what kind of customization we need to do to get your data imported. For those of you that are just adding the encounters, easy peasy, like I said, you pop the information right here into our portal. Some folks just they're logged in all the time and they're entering the information. Other folks, you just download the measure template right here. You can fill it out whenever you want and upload it whenever you want, as long as it's before February 28th. QRDA3 files, basically you go into your EMR, you do the query, you write into your EMR QRDA3 for the year, or if you're only doing 90 days, whatever it is you want, you export those files. The QRDA3 file has its actual own file format that the EMR exports, and you drop it right here into our portal. And then the dashboard automatically shows you what the score is for the QRDA3 files, and then you'll be able to use the optimizer as well and compare the scores. And then you click on Submit to CMS, and you are done. Now, what you will want to look for is you'll see various green check marks and X's as you go along the way. So as you continue to get green check marks, that means you're doing the right thing, you're coming along, you're following the rules. If you see a red X, it's usually going to have a bullet point list at the top of the red X in the portal telling you what still needs to be done, either to meet data completeness for the measure, either you haven't entered enough encounters, you still need to enter more measures, different things like that. So it's going to kind of continue to give you a red X until you've completed all the steps that you need to for the particular PACE or category that you're participating in. So if you're doing 90 days, for example, a common error is someone might submit all this encounter data, and when you ticked off about your clinic and you put in the 90 days that you were submitting data for, and you start submitting data, you'll be like, why am I getting all these X's? A lot of times what people do is they designate, well, I'm submitting data between the periods of October 2nd and December 31st, right? That's 90 days of data. But they'll start importing encounters from April. The portal won't accept those encounters because those don't fall within the 90 days that you designated. So stuff like that, it's going to tell you as you go if you're making any wonky choices or what's going wrong, and it's either going to fail the import or it's going to accept it, but it's not going to give you credit for it, and it's going to tell you why. So those are just things to pay attention to when you're inside the portal and working within our software. Once you've entered the data, there's lots of different ways to slice and dice it when you're looking at the analytics section of the menu on the side. You can break it up by your group practice. You can break it up by the actual measure. How are you doing on the measure? You can look how you're doing within your group, how your providers stack up and compare against each other. So multiple ways to slice and dice the data. At this point in time, because we're at the end of the year, these analytics tools are awesome, and a lot of people use them when they're starting at the beginning of the year because they want to start seeing right away how their providers are scoring, how everybody's doing against the benchmark, how they're doing on the measures, because they have time within the reporting year to actually make changes in clinically in what they're doing. At this point in time, you're not going to have a lot of time to make changes, but at least you'll be able to see how you've done for the whole year, so that for 2018, you'll know, oh man, for quality measure right here, 24, well, we're only at 57%. That's not great, compared to 154 where we're at 85. What's going on here? You'll at least now have time for 2018 to kind of go back in and look at those measures and look at the performance and look at what might be issues. It could be small, very small tweaks that need to be made in what's happening with that particular provider. If you're breaking it down by provider or breaking it down by group. So again, these analytics tools are going to be much more useful to you in looking at your data and how to make improvements for next year. Right now, they're just basically going to tell you, at least you'll know before you submit to CMS how you're performing, and you can actually use the analytics to slice and dice and say, well, we did really crappy on that measure. We're not submitting it. Let's not submit it this year. And you can drop that one and pick another one. So use the analytics tools that way at this point. But then at least if you know, well, man, I really wish we could be using that measure. Actually, technically, we should be performing really well on that measure. Let's re-implement it for 2018. But now that we know we were struggling with it, let's figure out and identify, and P360 consults on that. So with our CMO, you could talk to Dr. Jorgensen, sit down, have a consult appointment, and decide strategically, well, these measures we performed really well on in 2017. We didn't have time to make changes on these other few for 2018, but they seem like really solid measures. They're applicable. We should be performing well. What can we do differently in 2018 to perform better on these? And really, sometimes it only takes a couple of hours of strategically looking at what's happening with the measure, what's happening clinically to make those changes. So those are just things to consider about our analytics. You want to compare your provider's performance rate for each measure against the P360 average. You also want to compare the performance rate for a measure across all of your providers. You want to compare it against a specialty. You want to break down your provider and group practices score by category measure. And you also want to see how your provider or group scores against the national benchmark. So every benchmark that P360 is vetted by CMS to report on all measures, but not all measures have a national benchmark designated by CMS. Most of them do, and for each one of them in the portal, when you scroll down in the measure specification to look at the measure, it'll tell you exactly what the benchmark is. And I showed you that before, that little section where it says decile. We talked about those topped-out measures. It's going to show you the measure starts at 3 points and finishes at 10 points. You can get up to 10 points for each quality measure and a minimum of 3 points. And remember, those measures, once again, that do not have a national benchmark yet, they're only worth 3 points. So it's just something to keep in mind, again, when strategically picking out your measures. What should you be doing right now? At this point in the year, what should you have done? And if you haven't done it, what do you need to skedoodle on and get moving, get cracking? First of all, you got to know if you're reporting individually as a group. Like I said, anybody in this call that has more than 2 providers in their TIN, case closed, you should be reporting as a group, no doubt. And if you still have questions about that, let us know. If you're just a solo provider and you're on this call, then you're going to be reporting individually. So make sure that you're aware of that, you know that, and you've designated that in our portal. You want to select the appropriate measures as we've been talking about across all 3 categories that you're going to be reporting on for the 90-day pace. Make sure that you get that section about your clinic up to date, because remember, the software is going to calculate everything based on what you enter for about your clinic. And then you want to get that encounter data added. So either if you're adding it by a QRDA, by a template, if you're uploading it directly into the portal, if you have some other way that you want to get us the data, please talk to Heather about that so that we can customize and get that started for you immediately, because we are in December and there is going to be some retroactive kind of going back in and pulling data for your different measures. So it's important to get started on that now. I'm going to pause for a minute. Any questions, Heather?
We do have a question kind of touching on what you just talked about with group reporting. And it kind of needs a little bit more clarity about if you have a group with 20 providers and you have one provider in the group that's doing really well, can you just submit on that one provider and that the whole group would benefit? I think we need a little bit more clarity on how many providers to report.
It depends on how many patients that provider saw. So it's not about the providers, it's about how many patients to meet data completeness. So the rule is for each measure, you need to report on greater than 50% of the denominator eligible patient encounters for each measure. So if it happens to be that you have 20 providers and one provider sees all the patients for that particular measure for whatever reason, then that's fine, because that's going to be 50% of the patients that we're seeing if that one provider is seeing all those patients. Is that usually the case? Not really. Like, that seems like a very extreme example. What I would say something is more like, in a less extreme example, if you've got 10 providers and they're all reporting, but let's say they report on 60% of all the patients seen for measure 46. Well, and it happens to be that of those 10 providers, when we go back and look at the encounters, maybe 3 or 4 providers didn't even see patients for measure 46. That's okay, as long as greater than 50% of the patient population was reported on for that measure. So it doesn't matter which providers in the group saw the patient. And yes, technically speaking, if it's only one provider out of 20 that saw all the patients, then that's fine, because that's 100% of the patients. But you want to be careful with stuff like that, because that's kind of an unlikely case. Meaning, when you think about if you've got 10 providers in a group and you're picking, say, measure 46, the chances of only one provider seeing every single patient for measure 46 is probably pretty unlikely. Does that make a little bit more sense?
I think that does, and we will definitely follow up with you, Liz, to clarify that further. If you need additional help on that, we can chat outside of the webinar. No problem. Thank you.
So where are you all in the process right now? Folks that are kind of already in and trucking along, make sure you're getting that data entered on a regular basis, as often as you can. Utilize those analytics tools. Like we just mentioned, there's not a lot of time right now to make huge changes in clinical behavior, but you do still have a month left. So if you're noticing something really egregious with one of the measures, like, oh my gosh, our performance is 10%, this is ridiculous, like, it could be something really weird, or just some kind of strange tick that you could make a massive improvement on in the last month by simply asking a question or ticking off a certain box. It could be that simple, and if you can make that kind of improvement in performance in a month, that will actually make difference in the point scoring for that measure. So encourage you to kind of use these and make sure there's no statistical outliers right now here in 2017 for the measures that you selected in the performance. Adjust your clinical behavior again. These adjustments are harder to make now at the end of the year, but you definitely want to think about this when you're looking at the analytics tools for how you want to utilize things in 2018. And then, of course, you want to aim for the bonus from CMS by submitting exceptional data. And exceptional means trying to report across all 3 categories puts you in a better place to gain those 70 points. So 70 points is the magical number to try to get the exceptional bonus. Each category is worth a certain amount of points, and that's a different MIPS session where we cover the different educational session where we explain the different points and categories and rules. So again, if you need a brush up on that, just reach out to Heather or pop onto our website. All of those have been recorded, and you can listen in on, oh gosh, what was it again that I need to do to get 70 points? I know 3 categories, but how many are they all worth? What do I have to do? But the more categories you report on, the more patients and the more points you're able to achieve closer to 70, that's going to equate into that exceptional bonus category, which equates eventually into more money in your pocket. So our MIPS reporting now, we are here in the last quarter at the end of the year, so you can discuss with Heather if you're ready to contract. I know some of you on the call wanted to just get a brush up because you're already clients. Those of you who are brand new, have a chat with Heather. She'll get you started in the contract process for either regular MIPS or for QCDR. Remember, in the beginning of that call, I'm going to remind you one more time that you're collecting encounter data. You're reporting on encounter data from January 1st to December 31st, but you have up until the end of February to get all of that data into the Patient 360 portal. So you do still have time to get 90 days and even the full year, especially if you've got QRDA3 files. Those take like 15 minutes to upload and pull from an EMR. So you could technically get the whole year of data in, easy peasy, and be done with it. And then use the optimizer scorer, which is fantastic, because you can pop all the data in and then look at this optimizer will automatically parse out the best encounters, and it will make sure that it's greater than 50%, and that's the score. Those are the encounters that get submitted to CMS. So strongly encourage you to take a look at that if you have QRDA3 files. And then again, once again, you have all the way up until the end of February to submit with us. And just by submitting something with us anyway, you're going to automatically avoid the downward payment adjustment. But for those of you that are sticking around to try to do this more fully, we're trying to get you into that bonus category, which means trying to uphold some of the things that we've just covered on this call. Really being strategic about selecting measures, getting as many points as you can on the quality measures, trying not to select topped out ones or ones that are not benchmarked, right? So strategically, you can actually get more points for the quality category, making sure that you're reporting on all those ACI base required measures that you need to. And then of course, don't forget about that IA category. It is so easy. It's like a gimme. It's a new category and it's an automatic 15 points. So the portal's going to tell you, XX, you haven't done the improvement activities category. It will let you know so that you don't forget at the end before you click on submit to CMS. And all the data is scrubbed anyway. Someone will reach out to you and say, hey, did you mean to just like skip the improvement activities category? Because all you kind of have to do is click on a few boxes. So that's just something to keep in mind when you're looking at aiming for that bonus in 2019. So I know we went a little bit over. We were trying to aim for a half an hour because I know everybody's really busy. But I do want to allow for time for questions, or if you have to jump off and you would prefer to email us questions after, that's not a problem at all. I'll pause for a minute. We'll leave some time for questions in the chat box, and then Heather will be following up with you, and you can also follow up with Heather if you have direct questions that you'd prefer to send via email. Thanks so much, everyone. I'm going to pause.
Amanda, there were a few questions that came in. However, you were able to weave in the answers to those questions throughout the presentation, which is great. Again, as Amanda mentioned, if there are any additional questions that come up, or if you need any more clarity, especially on group reporting, since that seems to be some confusing for some people, certainly happy to provide answers to that in our FAQ document as well. You can reach me at sales@patient360.com if you'd like to talk about contracting for your practice. And I think we can leave it at that. Thank you all so very much for joining us this afternoon. We appreciate your time, and hopefully we'll be hearing from you guys soon.